And then I just wanted to, before I introduce LaVerne, is to just talk about, I just want to read this disclaimer that educational or instructional materials referenced during presentations at this session and the subsequent ones are for informational purposes only. Presenters' references to these materials do not constitute endorsement by the Alaska Department of Ed and Early Development or the Alaska Department of Health and Social Services. Any statements expressed are those of the presenters and do not necessarily reflect the views of the state of Alaska or the event sponsors. Let's move on and get me out of the way here. I want to introduce LaVerne Demientieff. She is, like me, a social worker, but she went on and did the next level of degree. She's a professor at UAF in that School of Social Work and teaches there. She's an LCSW, or rather a licensed master social worker, and is a trainer on, as you'll hear, you'll see these topics woven in, I think, today: historical trauma, historical wellness, adverse childhood experiences, resilience, trauma-informed care, and healing. I really think it's great too that she is focused on her language, Xilegg. I'm sure I did not pronounce that well, but and learning and teaching that language. And I love the way that she really incorporates that into her work, and I think we'll hear some of that today. So with that, I think I'm gonna stop sharing my screen, step aside, and LaVerne, let you run with it.
Good din, Pat. Thank you so much for inviting me to your kickoff this year. I'm actually going to share my screen really quickly so you can follow along my introduction. Actually try to do a portion of the screen. It gets in the way. If I can do this. I can never really do it seamlessly. I always have to see. Let's see. All right, let me just pull that down a tiny bit. How is that? Can you guys see my screen okay?
Yes, looks great, LaVerne.
Perfect. To look back at you guys. And I wanted to open the chat too, just in case you guys are chatting, any questions or any comments, totally open to any of that as well. Okay. All right. Well, Dogetin, I just want to introduce myself, starting off just with who I am and just kind of positioning myself in the work that I do. Xilegg. So my name is LaVerne Demientieff. Xilegg actually means springtime. It was given to me by Elder Jim Dementi, who was one of my elder mentors, helping to teach me the language. Degetanitlan, so I'm Degetana Athabaskan, and Deghenag is the language. So that's what Pat was pronouncing earlier. Deghenag, the X is like an H. Deloichet Histant, actually Deloichet Getringachagith Histan, which means my family and ancestors are from Holy Cross in Anvik, Alaska, and Southwest Alaska. I grew up in Nenana and Anchorage, and have lived in Fairbanks probably for the past, 25 years now. I work at the University of Alaska Fairbanks in the social work program, and I've been here since 2006, so it's going on 16 years. As Pat mentioned, my interest really lie in the areas of healing and wellness. So really looking and exploring the impacts of trauma, and also resilience, and not only trauma individually, but as a community. And so I'm super grateful to be doing the work and super grateful to be here. So this presentation today is called Healing Centered Engagement, Compassion, Connection, Community, Culture, and Curiosity. And it's what I call the 5 C's. And I actually started in 2017, I completed my doctoral dissertation in Degetan wellness. And for a number of years prior to that was working on exploring what wellness looked like among Degaton Athabascan people. And I not only talked with elders from my region, but elders from all over Alaska, and did my dissertation on Degaton wellness, and ultimately feel like what I've kind of gleaned from those experiences and elder knowledge kind of culminated in these 5 C's, and what I felt like were some of the most important things that I think that I took away from elders. And I actually use these 5 C's in a lot of ways. So I use them as a framework oftentimes. So I've incorporated them into my syllabi here at UAF. In the social work program. I use them as discussion points, so also reflection points in terms of how are we doing, both at the university level and also with my students, reflecting on compassion, connection, community, culture, and curiosity. And the work that we do, I think, can really bring us back into the present moment and allow us to work from a kind of a heart-centered space. And so I wanted to share that. It's a kind of a newer presentation that I'm doing, and it's based on a lot of things that I've already done. So some of you might have seen my other presentations. I do a presentation called Planting the Seeds and What's in Your Basket around trauma-informed care. So it does incorporate some of that, but really it's a culmination of what I see as some really important things that for me are ways that I want to do good work in the community. So I wanted to actually start in a good way. And I do this in most of my classes as well. And I have to say, almost every class that I start here at UAF, we start in a good way. And I've learned that from elders. So I co-teach with Elizabeth Flegel, who's a Nubak Athabascan elder here in Fairbanks. And, she's really taught me that, when we come together, and same with my Uncle Pat. I have that Uncle Pat Frank who lives in Anchorage. He's a traditional healer. And he also kind of instilled this in me, this notion that, whenever we come together to do something, whenever we come together as community, whenever we come together to do good work with each other, to start off in a good way. And some of the reasons for that is because we're each coming, from our own spaces, right? And some of that energy that we're expending, it could be energy around stress or just reflections around our work or busyness, or maybe even just worry, or it could be things around trauma. It could be also joys and successes, but we're all coming with this energy to this space. And, we're all in our own places. And he said, when you start off in a good way, and that could be all kinds of ways. Elders often do it with prayer or story or, something like that. You could do it with a meditation. You could do it with even just gratitude, which is what I want to do today. What that does is brings everybody together on the same page. And so we get kind of on that same energy level so that we can, engage, be present, listen, reflect, and such. So I wanted to start off in a good way today. This is actually outside my cabin last summer. And what you appreciate appreciates. So that's one of my favorite little sayings. I'm actually going to turn off my camera, and I just invite you to do the same if you'd like. And if you could just take a moment and, find yourself comfortable in a space where you can just maybe relax and listen, and feel free to even close your eyes or just take a moment for yourself. One of the things I think about starting in a good way in gratitude and even meditations, I often tell my students, we're doing a lot of work, doing a lot of good work in our communities. We're doing a lot of hard work in our communities. We are impacted by a lot of energies in the world. We are managing, and both the good and the challenge, right? And so I like to tell my students, whenever I do a meditation or start off in a good way, it's really your opportunity just to take the moment for yourself to just sit back and relax and close your eyes and just take a rest, to just honor yourself for this next couple of moments, and feel free to just listen. So I wanted to talk a little bit about gratitude first. Gratitude, I think, as we all know, is feeling thankful. It's actually an emotion of connectedness, right? It reminds us that we're part of a larger universe with all living things. The habit of gratitude can actually greatly help with feelings of inner peace, can actually increase mindfulness, it can attract more good into our lives. Gratitude connects us to the present moment. It uplifts our spirits and feeds our hearts. It can open our heart and actually activate positive emotion centers in our brain, right? So regular practice of gratitude can really change the way that our brain neurons fire into a more positive automatic pattern. Just really powerful, right? So gratitude habits and rituals of giving thanks have been passed down through cultures all over the world. And gratitude can help during times of stress or panic. So thinking of all of the hard times you've already overcome and all of the good that you have in your life can be amazingly reassuring. And so I think, even just strategies around gratitude really are, thinking of things that you're thankful for, right? So just, I'm going to actually lead you through a brief meditation just where you can reflect on some of these things today that you're thankful for. It could be items, experiences, life changes, emotions, people, really anything that you wish. You could actually start the day every day thinking about 3 things you're grateful for. You could end the day thinking about 3 things you're grateful for. You could create your own gratitude affirmation, and even, put them in a little box and pull them out for yourself or something. I think there's so many ways to practice gratitude, but it's a really powerful, activity. And I'm just going to say really quickly before I get into the meditation that I'm going to actually look and see who is off mute. Might be hard to. All right, here we go. Found it. Oh, there we go. Perfect. There we go. All right. So again, just find yourself, sitting comfortably. You can close your eyes if you want or not. I wanted to just lead us through 5 deep breaths. I have both a trauma history and a resilience history. And so I can go from 0 to 20 in my stress pretty quickly. I often notice that if I do 5 deep breaths at any point in time, I can bring myself back into my body and my nervous system just settles a little bit, right? And so one of the things to know about deep breathing, especially for those that have a trauma past or experienced a lot of trauma, or even just experiencing a lot of stress, is that it can actually be really uncomfortable to take a deep breath. But as much as you can, the best that you can, if you could take a deep breath into your belly, so your lower belly, like if you put your hand on your belly and you took a deep breath in, you'd actually feel your belly move out. And then what I love about a deep breath, honestly, is the exhale. The exhale, I love a good exhale, such a beautiful thing. And one of the things that you can do on an exhale is release. It's just release anything that's not serving you, release anything that is causing you, any stress or worry, any fatigue. You can release it on that out breath. So that's a beautiful thing. And when you exhale, if you can just push out as much air as possible. So the exhale, if you can do a long, drawn out exhale, that's some of the best exhales you can do. And oftentimes I'll tell others that I'm doing this with is just when you take a deep breath in, you can hold at the top. So you take a deep breath, hold for a second, and then a release on that exhale. And I can walk you through, but the other thing I want you to know is that sometimes, and I've experienced this myself where someone was leading a breathing meditation and I wasn't able to follow exactly the breath. And that's okay. So there's no right or wrong way to do this. I think finding what works for you in a breathing activity is a good thing. So it's totally okay if it's not in rhythm with how I'm leading it. So I just like us to take 5 deep breaths together. So if you take a deep breath in, all the way into your belly, and you hold at the top, and then exhale. Remember, on that exhale, you're releasing, letting go of anything not serving you, anything that's causing you stress or tension in your neck or your body. Releasing that on that beautiful exhale. All right, take another deep breath in. Hold at the top and release. letting out any toxicity, anything that needs to come out, all on that exhale. And if it doesn't feel good to hold at the top, you don't have to. Take another deep breath in. Hold at the top. And release. Long, drawn out exhale. Our fourth deep breath in. Hold at the top. And release. Feels so good. And on this final deep breath in, I just want you to breathe in sunshine and connection and love and goodness. Take a deep breath in. Hold at the top. And release. You should start feeling maybe your shoulders lower a little bit, your face gets a little bit more relaxed, your jaws, your eyebrows. When you take those deep breaths in like that, it's engaging your parasympathetic nervous system, which is your rest and digest. So it's going to cause you automatically to feel, maybe you might yawn, you might start feeling tired, but it's meant to bring you back into your body and to bring you back into balance. So I just want to bring awareness, and you can keep your eyes closed. I want you to bring into your awareness things in your life that you're thankful for. So just give gratitude the chance to come up naturally. And when it does, just let yourself sink into the feeling, surrender to it. Notice how it feels in your body, how your energy feels. And if it doesn't come up, that's okay. You don't need to try to make yourself feel it. Just surrender to your heart, not your head. So I want to bring you through some aspects of your life that you might be grateful for. So first, again, I want to bring your awareness to your breath. So as you inhale and exhale, and the fact that each of these breaths give you life, something to be grateful for. And then I want you to just be aware of your heart beating, pulsing, filling with love and compassion and peace, and flowing that back out to the world. You can bring awareness to your eyes that let you see color and faces and smiles and nature and sunrise, a sunset, the rainbow, moon and stars, or yourself in the mirror. I want you to bring awareness to your ears that beam in sound, music, laughter, and the voices of those you love, the silence and the beautiful sounds of life. I want you to bring your awareness to your nose that smells the ocean breeze, the aroma of sweet perfume, the flowers, the trees, newly cut grass, fresh snow or rain, the wafting smells that come in from the kitchen, bread in the oven. Bring your awareness to your lips and mouth that taste and savor and nourish and kiss and speak and whisper and sing all the beautiful things. Bring awareness to your hands that hold and touch and caress and open and close and applaud and squeeze, and the arms and shoulders that carry and hug and lift and stretch. Bring attention to your feet, your toes, the gift to wiggle them, to walk, run, dangle, dance, kick, fold, leap, or point. And what about your tears? Again, recognizing and honoring your tears, your sorrows, and strength that you seem to be able to muster to make it through each day. And bring awareness to your abundance, your expansion, your perspective, the flow and empathy and love and light, and your ability to see growth and potential in people and in moments. Just breathe and feel more grace and ease. Experience the warmth, love, and compassion that gratitude brings into your heart. You can drift your awareness to nurturing relationships in your life, the new ones or the older ones, anything material that maybe came to you unexpectedly, things that flow to you with great effort or commitment or hard work. You can think of the love in your life and your connection to those that are sweet and loving and feel just right. When we no longer take life for granted, we become grateful for everything that we have. So just breathe in one last time and then feel this flow. Good in. And I just want to welcome you back into the space, and turn back on my camera, and you feel free to do the same. So I'd love it, as I'm talking and as you're thinking, if you would want to express any gratitude in the chat. I always find that very inspiring and helpful when I hear what others are grateful for. And it's something that I think we can, just an opportunity to practice it. So I offer you that space to just write what you're grateful for in the chat. All right, so as I mentioned, this is the 5 C's. So the 5 C's that I have come up with are compassion, curiosity, connection, ceremony, and community. And so I'm just going to talk you through these as what I've learned from my elders, how I apply that in the work that I do, both with students and in my research and in my life in general. I just offer you, or I ask you to just reflect on how this might actually apply in your work and in your life. I love all of these. I'm so grateful to live in this gorgeous state. Gratitude for a strong circle of friends and community supporting me. Grateful for that mindful pause at the end of the day. Yes. Thankful for each of the senses you spoke about. I'm grateful that I get to greet students every morning at my high school and wish them good morning. Oh my goodness, amazing. My kids and grandkids, my Sifunga family, heart-centered space. All right. Staff, yes. Grateful for my home, perfect. Thank you so much for sharing. All right, well, let's start with compassion. It's one of my favorites. As I mentioned, I actually teach with this elder right here, Elizabeth Flegel, who I consider a mentor and a friend. And she co-teaches with me in the social work program, our rural social work cohort program. And when I think of compassion, I feel like she is one of the people that have really taught me what compassion looks like, because I think of compassion in a number of ways. One is self-compassion, one is compassion for others, but also just about love in general. And I work here at the university, and you would think that there's not many spaces where you hear the word love, or you bring love into the meetings that you're in, or even the classrooms. And sometimes it's even, people talk about you be careful about how to do that and all of that. But I have actually learned from Elizabeth that creating a space around love, and love being kind of the most deepest, just love for human beings, love for each other, love for being connected, love for all things, like love, just love, right? So if you create a space, and this is one of the things that I think elders do in the classroom, is they often create this space of compassion and love. And Elizabeth really sets that tone in our classroom quite often. And it's one of the reasons I think that when we engage in the material within social work with an elder that has created safety and love, it's a transformative space where we actually are engaging and learning at a higher level, where we are really applying the things that we are learning to our lives. And part of it is that safety piece, right? So I always say, having an elder presence, there's something about that. And so this is Elizabeth. You can see by her smile, I feel like she emanates compassion and love. And she was actually presenting at a national training. She was talking about it like 10 years ago. And she said, she was on a panel, and she was just sitting there listening. And she said, when some guy came up to her afterwards, and he said, I just wanted to say, I couldn't stop looking at you during your whole presentation because you sat there smiling the whole time. And she just said, well, I'm so happy. I'm happy to be here. I'm happy. I love life. And if you know Elizabeth, like, she just exudes joy. And I thought about, I don't know if you guys ever watched Eat, Pray, Love, the movie, or read the book, but there was Katut in there, and they talked about him, like, when you smile even in your liver, like let your liver smile. And I love that. I feel like she's like smiling in her liver. Oh, Angelina says, is there anywhere can we find a video to listen to her speak? And are you talking about Elizabeth?
Yes.
Oh, I probably do, but I'd have to search for it, but I can try to look for something and send something, definitely.
Sure, it just sounds so wonderful. That would
yes,
be
yes. And I often invite her to many things, because she is such a great role model. And we actually have other elders too that we work closely with, recognizing that, what they offer in the classroom in terms of the knowledge and just the wisdom, but also the safety and the love. And so I've learned a lot about compassion from Elizabeth. And, I think this is something that our elders, that are often elders with a capital E, that are giving back to their communities, often exude naturally, right? So this compassion for self and others. In the work that we do, I often think about, I actually was approached by my uncle maybe like 7 or 8 years ago now. And he came to me, and I was working here at the university, and he said, I'm worried about you. I'm concerned about you because you're working in this big, huge organization, this institution. And I want you to be mindful of when you're in places like this, how we can get in our heads, right? And I don't know if you guys know what I'm talking about. You guys work in organizations, big organizations too, where we often move through the world in our heads only, right? Because we're thinking about deadlines, our next meetings, we have to go pick up our kids at this time, we have to, do this, what's next on our schedule, we're writing our papers, we're doing our reports, all of the things, we tend to get in our head about the things, and we move through the world in this space in our organizations. And my uncle said, when we're in this space, we sometimes can feel we can get disconnected from our bodies, and our bodies might be telling us things like, I'm exhausted, or I don't feel good, or those types of things. And when we're disconnected, we have a hard time hearing the messages. So he was worried about me, saying, I don't want you to get sick. I don't want you to, burn out. I want you to be mindful. So he asked me to do something every day. And that was to practice moving from my head to my heart. And I tell you, it was the best advice I had ever been given. And so I started intentionally recognizing how often I was just in my head, right? And so in your head, oftentimes you're thinking about the past, you're worrying about this or that, you're stressing about something in the future, right? It takes you away from the present often. And again, it can disconnect you from your body and how you're doing. And when I started practicing moving from my head to my heart, very intentionally, I noticed that I was actually more self-compassionate. I was less judgmental on myself. I actually noticed that I was more compassionate with others. My connection with students got stronger. My connection with my colleagues got stronger. And it was really, really powerful. The other thing that I think that's related to that, it was kind of like, okay, I'm settling into myself. I'm being able to be myself, rather than just being in my head and being in my heart. So if you're asking yourself the question, how do you get to your heart space? There's a couple of strategies that you can try. And again, honestly, it was the best advice I've been given in our busy world, and what we're faced with on a daily basis, both with the pandemic and with trauma and with all of the stuff, right? I think this is such an essential practice that will keep us healthy. And So oftentimes for me, I do a number of things. One, I can just put my hand on my heart. I have my camera on, right? You guys can see me, so I'll double check.
Yes.
Oh, perfect. So I put my hand on my heart and I just settle it there. Some people do this naturally. If you've seen someone just talking and they naturally put their hand on their heart, or they just hold their chest right here, like you might know someone that does that just naturally. It's a very heart-centered, heart space kind of thing to do, really getting you back to just calming, connecting, being in the present. So that's one that I can do. Another one that helps me to get into my heart space is to I lost my train of thought. So getting into my heart space, I think, so the other piece, so I do some chakra work, right? And so the chakras, the heart chakra is like a green, it's a color, the color of green, like a beautiful green. And so I often think of just calling on, sometimes some people like to focus on color. And so I just call on a green mist, and I just, think about, again, sometimes I'll just keep my hand on my chest and just kind of call on this green mist, which is just this heart-centered expansion, right? Heart-centered expansion. There was another way that I was going to mention that I, for some reason, slipped my mind, but it will come back to me. But I think there are, so the other thing that you can do is reflect on or think about someone that you think is so dear to you, right? And I just look at this little picture of Shar here. She's our cohort baby. And even my elder, Elizabeth. And I can just think of them, and it brings me to a heart space. Sometimes I can think of the little girl that I was, and it'll get me to that heart space as well. So love of innocence or just preciousness, right? You can even think of a pet or like a landscape or things like that. But those can bring you to your heart space. And when you do this enough, I think that you can recognize when you're in your head and then moving back into your heart space. Again, it's going to help you connect. It's going to help you be more clear. It's going to help you be more authentic and open. And so I wanted to share that strategy with you. All right, so that's compassion. I think in a lot of our organizations and institutions, love and compassion has not always been at the forefront. And I think this is something that's shifting and changing, and it's a recognition that we are human beings. And I always tell my students, as again, it's kind of going back to, we are doing really, really challenging work in this world, and we're dealing with a lot every day. And I think it serves us to really, really find both self-compassion and also compassion for others, and getting to our heart space is a way to do that. All right, and I'm totally open to any comments or thoughts. I think compassion is something that has been modeled by elders, and if you know an elder, you probably have seen it modeled. All right. The other piece to compassion that I think relates to this, and I kind of alluded to it, about being yourself, being your whole person. I think about Dr. Rita Blumenstein, who recently passed, and she talked a lot about the importance of the whole person, right? And so that recognition that we are all of our experiences, both the challenges and the traumas and the joys and the resilience and the love. And so I often share this particular experience or story of my dad. This is my dad here. His name is Rudy, and he passed away probably, maybe 17, 18 years ago. And he was a really remarkable person. So he actually, he went to the Holy Cross Mission. He went to 3rd grade. And despite that, he was so brilliant. He could build a houseboat. He built our cabin. Him and my mom had 10 children, so he provided for a family of 10. He could live out on the land with nothing, in 40 below weather, and survive. He was called a riverman, so he could read the Yukon. He was very good at navigating the Yukon River. He was actually super funny. He was hilarious. Oh my gosh, just anybody that knew him, he had so many friends. He was always making people laugh. And he's probably the reason that I'm a social worker, because he had such a huge gift for wanting to help. He was, always had a pot of soup on the stove and was offering soup to people and inviting people in and just sharing whatever he had. He'd give you his last dollar if he had it. Just a really amazing human being. My dad was also an alcoholic. And so in my growing up years, there was a lot of chaos and unpredictability and abuse. And as I got older, I really reflected on how all of this can be in one person, right? All of the beauty and the challenge, and all of the beauty and the challenge, and all of the beauty. And I find it fascinating, which is probably why I teach human behavior, because it's just so fascinating to me, that we are more than just a problem that we might have. But sometimes in our society, we look at the problem that becomes kind of all encompassing. We forget that there's all of these other pieces to the person that would be important to know them, right? And so I love Dr. Blumenstein's approach, and she says, when you're in the whole, HOLE, start with the whole, WHOLE, right? And so recognizing, as we work with people and as we work with communities, that we're all coming to our spaces as whole human beings, right? We can't really actually separate our traumas and our pains and our griefs and our things that we might be ashamed of from the joys and the love and the light and the successes, and that we're all coming with a mixture of these things to any place. You're coming to this presentation, to our meetings. I'm attending teaching here classes, or attending meetings here at the university, right? Like, I'm coming to this space as a whole human being. And before I really learned about how to integrate and be a whole human being, I really tried to piece apart the pieces of me that I felt I was ashamed of. And so I would, I felt like, those were things that shouldn't be talked about, or they shouldn't be, I shouldn't have them as a social worker. What would people think of me if they knew that was my past, or, how I grew up or whatever. And so really didn't talk about them, and actually put a lot of energy in that. And I think that's something else that we do. We can put a lot of energy in those spaces of when we feel, of the challenges we've faced and experienced. And I did. I actually worked my whole adult life almost going to counselors and traditional healers, and I really enjoy that too. I do a lot of coaching these days. I get a lot of coaching, and I go to leadership symposiums. I read a lot of books and so on and so forth. And I really love learning about this process of healing and growth. And one of the things that I had to do with a traditional healer was to integrate those traumatic experiences with who I am as an adult today. And so that was really powerful. And so, recognizing that that sweet little girl that grew up when I was young, that took care of us and helped us survive, and was so savvy and just like smart, and kept us safe, and all of these things that I just really acknowledged that part of her, that part of me, in order to be able to heal as an adult. And And so I think this is a super important part that we have to understand, that we are all coming to the table as whole people. And, you know, when we can let go of some of the energy of trying to hide the shame and the realities of the challenges, and focus more on being heart-centered and connecting, you know, we can actually kind of just really light up and do the work that we want to do and are meant to do in the world. I'm not saying it's easy, but I'm saying I think that's something that I've learned. And I think that I just want to give gratitude to my dad for teaching me that. I added also, I don't know if you guys have seen Allison's poem, and I don't know if you're getting this PowerPoint, but this is a really good one. If you wanted to go back and watch it, this is someone at Georgetown University, I think. Anyway, Allison is a doctor in social work. I think she has, she's a clinician. She's also has a trauma history. And so she helps, it's like a 7-minute poem that she wrote about her life. It's really beautiful because it talks about how do we integrate those pieces of ourselves to be who we are in the world. And so many of us are coming to this work. And I know you guys, maybe most of you are not social workers, but I think we often come to the professions that we do because of the experiences that we've had in the world. And sometimes those experiences were traumatic or stressful or things like that. So, oops, that's really a good one. The other piece that I think is really good as we continue to talk about compassion is just, you know, self-care. I know that's kind of over talked about. This is actually one by Natalie Clark, who's an Indigenous scholar out of Canada. And she actually talks about self-care in a really important way, I believe. She highlights, and this is only like 8 minutes long or something, so it's super short. I just encourage you to go to it. But one of the things I love about what she talks about in self-care is she says, one, self-care is privilege, right? So not everybody has access to a gym, to bubble baths, to running water, to, you know, to fresh fruit or to nature. And so to recognize, you know, when we ask people to take care of themselves or to practice self-care, and we say, oh, just take a bubble bath, or, you know, go to the gym or start working out. And, you know, not everybody has access to running water or to gyms or to fresh fruit and all of those things. So she said, you know, actually self-care can be a privilege. So we have to really be thoughtful about our context and how we are thinking about self-care. And she says, and also, you know, it's okay to think about self-care, but she said we should expand that to community care. So as we talk about self-care, as we create a culture of care, there should be a culture of community care. So as we do the work of healing and recognizing our you know, our traumas and our triggers and all of these things, that we are talking about these things with others, that we are sharing our strategies, that we're building a culture of community care. And I think that's a really beautiful sentiment. Anyway, so Natalie Clark, she's done a couple of different things around trauma-informed care and healing, but this is a really good one. So Pat says they will post the slides. So in terms of healing-centered engagement practices for compassion, I always just say, you know, one is just practice moving from your head to your heart. Two, I didn't say talk about this, but creating an affirmation to begin the shift from thoughts that are not serving you. As someone that has a lot of trauma history in my past, my thoughts don't often serve me. So I do a lot of affirmation work. It's actually one of the ways that gets to our subconscious other than therapy. So it's something that can actually get and change our subconscious. So our subconscious is often things that we're steeped in in regards to our childhood, right? And so just beliefs about ourselves, our self-worth, how we belong, our identity, right? All of those things are often in our subconscious and drive us in the world today. And if those things have a lot of trauma attached to them, then they kind of seep up. But affirmations is an easy way that does not cost anything to get at those subconscious beliefs. And if you say them enough, and I have to tell you, I did a leadership program, Duran management training, gosh, 16 years ago, and we had to do a practice of creating our affirmation. So we had to say an affirmation that served us, and we had to stand up and we have to create it, and then we had to say it in front of a group of people. And the people were like, if you didn't step into it, if it didn't sound like, oh, that fit you, it was so good, then they asked you to redo it and come back and do it again. And mine eventually was, I am a happy, nurturing, divine woman living in the present, in awe of the world, loving myself and you. And I tell you that I said it 100 times or more every day for a year, every day. And I would even say, stop. I'm happy, nurturing, divine woman living in the present, not the world, loving myself and you. Stop. Like if I had a thought that wasn't serving me. And I think this is something, that we don't recognize in our society too much, that our thoughts are not always true, and that they are can actually be really limiting us and impacting us in a lot of ways. And that we have the power to shift those and find self-love and be remove those limitations. Yay. So Susan said, really want to do more affirmation work with kids in school. Yes, so good. It's so good. It gets at that. And it's something that, because like I told you 16 years ago that I started saying that affirmation, it's still in my head. So I could pick it up immediately today because I said it so many times. And it has really helped me. And then the last one is what we started with, which is cultivating gratitude. I'll get you into that heart space. The second one I want to talk about is connection. So the second C around connection is really focused on this notion that, the challenges that we are faced with often, the struggles that we have around depression or addiction or anxiety or anger or whatever it is, often create disconnections. And those disconnections can happen. I'm going to pull up this slide. That we can disconnect from ourselves, from our families, from our communities, from our culture, from nature and spirit. And so the nature of the challenge, when we experience intense struggles and challenges, especially something like major depression or addiction or anxiety and fear, anger, we tend to want to pull away because it's hard to be in spaces with other people, right? It's hard to muster sometimes the energy to do the things that we need to do, and it can feel overwhelming and just daunting, or we feel judged, or we feel like we're not good enough. So there's all kinds of things that are wrapped in that, and so we tend to disconnect. On the same token, our families and our community, our friends that love us, oftentimes also disconnect from us, from those that are struggling. It's not because we don't love them, but a lot of times it's just because it's hard. We don't know what to do, right? We're just in the space of, I don't know how to help. I'm not sure how to offer this or that. And so we disconnect too. So you can see like disconnection just becomes like this rampant thing that happens around challenge. And I think one of the best things that we can reflect on and try to think about is how do we cultivate connection back up, right? And remember, we can also disconnect from ourselves, right? We disconnect from our bodies. I think one of my things was to disassociate. So I liked to disassociate a lot, right? Just from my own trauma, and recognizing that that's a form of disconnection, really not, being in my body or experiencing my body. Some people disconnect from culture, some people disconnect from spirit, religion, nature, right? And so community, family, friends. And so thinking about how can we help people connect back up is a super important strategy. I was talking with Linda Tai, who's so amazing, does a lot of trauma work here in the state and nationally. And she said, one of the goals of a therapist is to seduce clients into getting into groups, which my first thought was like, why seduce? That's a weird word. And then, but then I finally got what she was getting at. Because one of the things she said is like, well, when you get into groups, think about it. Like when you get into groups of people, especially people like clubs, or it could be support groups, or it could be any kind of group, you're often with people that you can relate to. You're often with people that are sharing their life experiences. So you might be inspired by them. You might be learning something from them. You might be, they might be modeling, behavior for you, appropriate behavior, positive behavior. They might be sharing their stories so that, like you realize that you're not alone in the world, that you're not the only one that experiences these things, right? They might be doing all these things anyway. So groups are really powerful in helping us get connected back up, right, to ourselves and into the healing process. And so the seduce part came in was because when you're feeling really intense emotions, it's really hard to want to go to group. Like it's like the last thing you want to do. So she said, how do we entice people to get there, right? So and to begin the process of interacting with others. And sometimes that's just, really, encouraging, supporting, and just thinking about ways to help people get into groups because they can be healing spaces. So that's the other piece that I think I wanted to mention on that is just the importance of finding ways to help people get connected. And, connection, it's so like, it doesn't have to be anything big. When I was in 5th grade, I had a teacher. I had just moved to Mountain View Elementary. I moved to Anchorage, and I went to Mountain View Elementary. And I had a teacher there, Miss Kramer and Miss Carter. And I was like, one of the things she did is she'd get down on my eye level and look at me in the morning and just see me. And I was like, at first it was like, whoa, this person is like intense, but I loved it because I never really got like people that looked at me like that before. Like they saw and they were so happy to see me. There's a whole thing about mirror neurons in our brains. If you guys do some of the trauma work, and mirror neurons really are, for me, one of the ways that I think there are a lot of implication to mirror neurons, but one of the ways that I think about it is that we often understand ourselves by the way we see ourselves in others' faces, right? So as if you enter a room and people's eyes light up, or people, connect with you, or they engage with you, or they encourage you, or they see you, they begin to interact with you, whatever it is, right? We oftentimes get a lot from that, right? We see ourselves in that. We understand who we are in the world because of that. And there's a lot of people, especially with extreme trauma and stress, that don't have that in their life every day, which is a really, really sad thing, right? So a lot of people are not looking at them with like awe and love and like, I'm so happy to see you. And so even just that little piece of being that for someone is like lighting up when they come into a room is a beautiful thing. And immediately you feel connection. Those mirror neurons are so powerful that it can go into someone else's body. Catchy, yes. Susan says mood is catchy, mirror neurons, mood is catchy. Yeah, absolutely. Anyway, so that is, I think, something in terms of connection. I think there's so many great ways to have a conversation about connection, but what can we do to connect to each of these circles ourselves in the work that we do so that we, just can continue to cultivate that as we do good hard work. And then how can we build connections in each of these circles for ourselves and others? The other thing I like to talk about in relation to connection is actually relationality. And so relationality and relational accountability are two terms that I learned in a book called Research is Ceremony by Sean Smith. And he's talking about researchers generally when he's talking about this, but I always tell my students this applies to helpers in any form or fashion. It can apply to anyone really. But what Sean Wilson talks about in his book around relationality is he says, part of the work that we can do with others that will help us in that engaging that relationship and really understanding and building rapport with people, is understanding this concept of relationality. And really what it means is learning about what relationships are important for the people that we're working with. What relationships are important for the people that we're working with. And those relationships can be what people relationships are important, right? So learning what relationships are important in that realm, learning what relationships are important with nature, animals, the land, fishing, hunting, right? Learning what relationships are important in regards to practices. So, recognizing hunting season or fishing season, berry picking season, are important times in people's lives, right? Relationality is what is important to the people that we're working with. And that's going to help us know how to best engage and support the learning and just the connection that we have with them, right? And the work that we're doing with them. But he goes on to say, like, the other piece to that is like, you can't just stop at relationality. He says, once you understand what relationships are important, he says there's this other concept of relational accountability, which really says that once you understand what relationships are important, how are you going to be accountable to those relationships? What are you going to do now that you know that, right? And that's part of just doing that respectful work and engaging, being student-centered and all of those things, right? So relational accountability, how are you going to be accountable once you know what relationships are important? And that I think is really powerful. I think about, in regards to research, he was like, if you know a community is going fishing in the month of June and you start your research that month and you ask people to stay and do interviews with you or focus groups with you, that would not be relationality or relational accountability, because if you understood the importance of something like subsistence to the family, to healing, to wellness, to the future, to spirit, the connection to spirit, like, you would not ask people to not do that in the name of your own organization or research or work. If you understood the relationality, you would be relationally accountable to that. I just added this this print here. My niece, Rebecca Gedinity Hartman, is an artist. She just graduated with her BFA, and she did her art show around Degaton, Decanog, language revitalization. And so I wanted to add this because I wanted to highlight some different aspects of relationality that you may or may not be aware of. So as Pat mentioned earlier, when he was introducing me, I do a lot of my own Decanog language work, and it's really connected me, right, to my community, to who I am. It connected me to my own wellness, to really understanding my relationship in the world. And Sakangane is the name for dragonfly in my community. And Sakangane means protect me. So dragonflies are protectors. And we can imagine, they eat mosquitoes. So yay, dragonflies. But I was surprised to learn that dragonfly meant protector in a lot of cultures. I was like, oh, fascinating. That's so fascinating. But it's my protector, right? And if you look at language in general, a lot of words highlight this important relationship. So spider in my language, avasololok, is my dear grandfather. That's the literal translation. Raven, yochkitsi, is everyone's grandfather. Gera, brown bear, means literally older brother. And there's stories, like there's phrases in the language. I was talking with the late Daisy Demientieff, and she said, when she was little, she would be out on the boat and watching for the ravens turning over, because if you saw one flip that way, right, they're dropping a pack sack of luck on you. And so she and her siblings would always watch for that pack sack of luck so that they could get that. And this is a super important understanding of relationships, and it's built into the language. It's so beautiful, so beautiful. But I just wanted to give those as also examples of relationality. Oh, so cool. Susan said Mountain View Elementary in the 80s. I was there for 5 years. I love the 80s. The most gifted, compassionate staff I ever had the privilege to work with. That's so wonderful. That's so cool. I was there in the 80s. Maybe we knew each other. So funny. Oops. All right. So around connection, I think I just added some practices. Journal about the way that you can nurture connection with your own life in the area of self, family, community, culture, nature, and spirit. So just reflecting on that, or you can even journal about it. Supporting and cultivating connection for those that you work with in your positions. So recognizing, when you help make friendships and lead people into, groups in the school, like all of those things will help build connections, which build support, which build identity, which build belonging, which build on and on wellness, right? So, and then relationality, I added, learn about the Indigenous people on your land and create your own land acknowledgement and our honoring of Indigenous people's knowledge and practices in the work that you do. So this one, this C is community, and it kind of relates to connection, but I think of it differently as well. When I talk with elders, one of the things that I notice is that they yearn for community, like they yearn for community. And they remember beautiful, beautiful memories of how the community came together. I was talking with one elder from my area, and he said, I remember when the whole community would go out and go eeling together. We would always do that. Like as a whole community, we would do things. Not just in bad times, in good times. And he said, this really brought us together. It strengthened us. We laughed and had fun and, learned from each other. And there was so much that was happening. It was always like a celebration. And he said, I really wish I could see more of that these days. I feel like it's gone a little bit by the wayside. And so our elders often talk about community and really want, that community in their lives and feel it. And when you think about it, how essential community is, healing and wellness often happens within relationship to others, right? So healing and wellness often happen within relationship to others. And that's just something that we know that exists. So elders share many examples of how Alaskan communities come together for celebration in times of hardship, how people our Indigenous people often do many things together, fishing, berry picking, hunting, and other activities. When I was in Anvik a few years back, I was with my uncle, and they have a board of ancestors, and he was telling me who the people were that would go berry picking together. And he said, it's really important that these people that were all berry picking together or doing, going to fall camp together or spring camp together, because they were your kind of support system, your people, which I thought was really awesome. And I'm thinking it's relating to clans as well. So yeah, I wanted to just share a little bit about, I created this this map of my language, and it's just a vision board. Ultimately, as I continue to learn my language, I also facilitate a weekly language group, and it has really become a beautiful community that I draw a lot of strength from. And so I just shared, this is something that just inspires me to keep doing the work. To learn any new language, first you need to fall in love with it. Your word is the power that you have to create. My grandmother's lingo. Anyway, I just wanted to share, so I like doing these things because thinking about community, I think, is really inspiring. So again, one of the ways, and I have the wrong slide here. So I didn't move far enough down. There we go. So creating a community of learners that support each other is important. I think one of the things that we've done in social work that has really been beneficial is to create, we have a rural social work cohort, and our cohort students that are across the state often move together throughout our program. And that has been really powerful because it's created that level of support and engagement and connection and all of the other things. So creating community of learners are really a really powerful thing to do. Reflect on what communities are missing and what communities can be created to provide that sense of belonging, connection, and support. So you might even think about in your schools, what kind of communities can be built, maybe what type of communities are missing, and what communities can be created. Watch the video titled ABCs of Self-Care. I talked a little bit about that earlier, and that where she was talking about building a culture of community care. And then 3, create your own vision board focused on a community that you want to build and set your intentions on making that happen. Again, healing and wellness often happen within relationships with others. So I want to just be cognizant of time here. So I have 2 more to get through. Curiosity is the next one. So I'm a trainer on History and Hope, which is Alaska's adverse childhood experiences training. I would just encourage you, whenever I think of curiosity, and again, as I've talked with elders, one of the main values or ways of being is focused around observing and listening, right? And so just taking in information and learning from that information as much as possible. And so I think about, this, and I think adverse childhood experiences, especially in the work that you guys are doing, but in any realm, honestly, is so important to understand and know about. And so I just wanted to encourage you, if you haven't been to an ACEs training, which I'm positive you have, but if you haven't for some reason, I would highly encourage you to go again, and then go again, and then go again, because as you learn it, there's something that happens and evolves. And you think about learning it, you get it, right? You get what happens in the brain, you get what happens with trauma, you get what happens, you get why you might be triggered, you get why you might be reactive, you get why there might be behavioral issues, or why people might start smoking early or drinking early. But thinking about how that applies in your classroom and how you can do your work differently often happens over time, right? And so that just begins to build and build and build. And every time I've gone to an ACEs presentation or History and Hope, I feel like I've solidified something differently. And actually, I brought this into some work around climate change. So, these kinds of things are powerful, I think, in every setting. And one of the things that I'm doing is working with Melinda Chase here at the University of Alaska Fairbanks, and she does a lot of work with communities around climate adaptation. And when things are happening in communities, there's a lot of adaptation that has to happen in terms of planning, and sometimes whole communities are moving, and there's just all kinds of shifts in permafrost and how that impacts infrastructure. And they brought me in because one of the things that we're missing in climate adaptation planning was thinking about the impacts of trauma on decision making and community cohesiveness. And what an important thing to know and to be able to begin to support, right? And so I feel like this is like learning about this and kind of taking that into other realms, other disciplines, other parts of the world in different spaces, adds to everyone's growth around it. So I would just encourage you, if you haven't, to do that. They provide free trainings. That's the Alaska Children's Trust. I'm not going to share this story with you. It's called The Quiet Death, but I wanted to just talk about it for 1 second. So my uncle Pat often writes short little stories, and I often share them in my presentations because I think one of the things that are so important, is so important to continue to do, is to help nurture and build that relationship with our earth and in nature. And when we have a relationship with something, when we understand that relationality, and when we have a relationship with something, we tend to want to care for it, right? And if we don't have that relationship, sometimes it's easy to just forget about or minimize or not say that's not my, problem or whatever. And so I think there's been a lot of disconnection with the earth and with nature. And I always bring in, there's so much, one of the things that my uncle has taught me is that there's so much that nature is trying to teach us in so many ways. And it's a beautiful thing. You know, I was well, there's so many things. Like one of the things he said was, you know, when you're out in nature, look for signs, not even just nature, in the world, anywhere in the world, be in the city, right? Look for signs from the universe. And they come all the time, all the time, all the time. And if you really just allow them, notice them, allow them to come in, you can really learn from them. I was actually crying to him a couple of years ago about like, just, you know, I was like, oh, I wish I want somebody to care for me. Like I'm always like doing all the work and I have to care for everybody. And I just want somebody to care for me. And, you know, he never ever tells me like the answers to anything. He never gives me, but in the course of our discussion, he said, I want you to practice one thing for me as you leave here and let me know what you think. And he said, I want you to try to notice how the universe is caring for you. I was like, okay. And so I did. And I was blown away by the ways that the universe, the world, the earth, nature, other people care for you on a daily basis. And once you start noticing the care that's out there for you, it's super hopeful. And so you can really gain a lot of strength from that. And it was just things like people letting me in, you know, as I was driving, or just a smile. It could be anything small, but I was like, all of these are acts of caring, right? And so people are caring for me. The universe is caring for me. And that was super empowering. So I feel like I just like to add this in because I think we, in the work that we do, as thinking about the whole person connected to everything, the universe, it's important to understand those relationships and how beneficial those relationships can be in our work. First, you know, here's something to keep in mind. For every trauma history, whether it's individual, family, group, or community, there's also a survival or wellness history, a history of resilience. So I never, you know, when I first started working at UAF, I had a student tell me, Indigenous student, you know, say, wow, why is everything that I learn about myself statistics about how we're dying or have cancer or diabetes? I never actually see the beauty of who I am depicted here. And it was a powerful thing to, I knew that, but for me as a professor, I was like, oh yeah, that's not okay. That's like, how do we need to shift that over, and not just me, I'm not just talking about me, but the university as a whole. And I think there's been a lot of work in that in a lot of areas, but it was one of those things, right, that we are so problem focused as a society. We tend to focus on the challenges, which is really easy to do. And oddly enough, it's harder to focus on the strengths and really try to identify the strengths. But I'll tell you, if you go down the problem focused space, right, if you begin focusing on the problem first, and you're focusing on the problem and you're trying to understand the problem, and you're looking at the problem, you're trying to identify the problem, you're talking about the problem, you're asking about the problem, that already just kind of feels heavy, right? Like even just saying that, I was like, oh, it's so exhausting. Because the problems are big, they're huge and they're complex, and you're like, where do I begin? And then you're like, now people, and then you start getting like these feelings of like, well, people don't even try, they're not even meeting me halfway. So we have all these frustrations about the problem, and it can really just bring us down this rabbit hole where we can't find solutions. And so I always tell my students, but also just in general in the work that we do, like how do we when we come across individuals, families, communities, start with strengths, and it will take practice, because sometimes you're like, where are this, like I don't know what's good here, what's going right. But if you look for them hard enough, you will find them. Every person, everybody, individual, family, group, or community that has a trauma history has a survival or wellness history. There's resilience in there. And so there's a really amazing book, Healing the Soul Wound by Eduardo Duran, where he tells his clients, he's Indigenous psychologist, he tells his clients like, wow, you're really in a powerful place. And these individuals often are like, what? Like, I don't feel powerful. I feel really not okay right now. Like, it's why I'm here to see you. And he says, well, let me tell you, you made a decision in your life to walk through my door, to call me, to attempt to heal, to make a step towards wellness in your life. And he said, what you started was ripples of energy in the fabric of the universe. And those ripples are actually rippling out to your like family and your friends and beginning to heal them. And they're even rippling out into the future and healing your grandchildren, and they're rippling out to your ancestors and they're healing your ancestors. And he said, that's pretty powerful. And that's just you making that choice to do this. And I think that's a beautiful thing. Like, that is like the essence of like strength in looking at, trying to find strengths. As I keep moving this. There's a lot. This is actually the YouTube I wanted to share. It's a trauma informed practice, and it's the same person, Natalie Clark. So good. That I just want, I think if you are interested in trauma informed care, her experience and the way that she talks about it is really impressive and so informative, and real and honest. And she works with a lot of young women. So I guess the last one, and I'm not going to talk too much about trauma. I know you guys have probably a lot of that, but if I would just say 3 strategies, I would say be curious about how trauma impacts feelings and behavior in yourself and others, right? One of my favorite people to learn about trauma from right now is Gabor Mate. So you can Google him and find out a lot of videos and podcasts and books. He's so fascinating in how he talks about addiction and trauma. He has a really great video out now called The Wisdom of Trauma. 2, ask questions related to strengths and highlighting those strengths in others. And then 3, be open to signs from nature and the universe. And then the last one is ceremony. And I think we have 5 minutes left, Pat, or am I out of time?
No, you can go. Keep going.
Okay.
You're good. 5
okay.
or a little more is fine.
Okay. So the last C is ceremony. And sometimes non-Indigenous people don't feel like they have ceremony in their lives, or they're not sure how to equate that into the work that they're doing or things like that. And I just want to talk a little bit about ceremony. So I was listening to Indigenous elder Wilson Justin a while back, and he said, one of the reasons why Indigenous people are still here is because of ceremony. And he said, ceremony connects us to who we are, connects us to spirit, connects us to each other, brings us into the present. And when we have gone through challenges throughout time, we have created ceremonies to get back into balance and to manage those challenges. And so I think a lot about, there's so many amazing ceremonies in the state of Alaska, in different cultures and communities, and across the world that do this, right? And so you take things like the memorial potlatch or potlatch naming ceremonies, whaling feasts, festivals. In my area, there's something called Tea Partners Saholid. These types of ceremonies are often built into the fabric of communities, and they are not separate from us. So a lot of our, this is something I'm really interested in exploring now in some of my research, because a lot of the health and wellness stuff that we do today, just as human beings on this earth, is we seek people external to us, external to our communities often, right? We go to doctors or to mental health clinicians, or we go to the spa, or we go outside of us, right? To seek help. But a lot of these Indigenous practices and ceremonies were built into the communities. And so I wanted to just share an example with you of the power of that, because I think we can learn from that about what that looks like. So examples of resilience and wellness are rooted in cultures and communities across Alaska and the world. Oh, that's me, King Salmon, Aniak, Kuskokwim River. This is one from the slide from my planting the seeds presentation, but basically all cultures experience challenges in life. Traditional practices and ceremonies function to both prevent and restore balance, and these practices plant seeds of wellness. So I feel like I'm not going to do the planting seeds presentation, but one of the things that I talk about is the fact that if you there are things that you guys do probably on a daily basis with your students that plant seeds, right, far into the future. And I just talked about one, right? So like actually seeing someone. I talked about the teacher that actually saw me, right? One of the things I feel like that for me planted a seed. When you plant seeds around healthy ways of being or knowledge, or introducing someone to like Indigenous dancing or drumming, or connecting them to a group or things like that, right? When they experience some of these things, they may sometimes, young people, act like, oh, it was fun, but they don't act like they maybe learned from it, or maybe they veer away from their culture for a while, or they veer away from the practice. But as people get older, and as you go through life and you go through challenges, one of the things about seeds that are planted early on is when you go through those challenges, you're able to look back and draw strength from those seeds that were planted, or sometimes those seeds begin to grow and flower later on in life. And so they're super, super powerful. So thinking about the ways that you plant seeds is important. And traditional ceremonies and practices, I think, are major important seeds to plant. Examples of resilience and wellness are rooted in all cultures and communities across Alaska. And so I just wanted to highlight one, and I'm just trying to think of which one I can do. So tea partner from my area is Xilegg, and Xilegg is like your special friend. And what used to happen in my area doesn't happen anymore, but people still have tea partners today, that the ceremonial process hasn't happened in a while. It's something I'd love to see come back. Although I do have a tea partner because my uncle, anyway, it's another story. But so tea partners were elders would connect like someone older and someone younger, often a young man and a young woman together, not romantically, but they were your tea partner for life. And so there's huge, people would make a big deal about it, right? There was often like, recognition, like this is a tea partner, there was a dinner, there was gifts, and so you felt really special. Sometimes it was thought of like godparents, sometimes it was thought of like mentors, but ultimately people had these tea partners within communities and across communities and for life. So it was thought of as an honor. You were meant to honor that person, they were meant to honor you. So if they came into your community, you would make sure that they were okay, that you brought, invited them to lunch or whatever, you would make them feel special. What a beautiful thing, right? It's truly like a safety net that the community in my area had built for themselves, right? And one of the things that the power of it is I went to see a doctor at Chief Andrew Isaac, a white woman, maybe in her 50s or 60s. And I was telling her, she was asking me about my wellness practices, and I was telling her about the tea partner, and she was asking me about my research, and I was telling her about the tea partner, and she said, "You would not believe this, LaVerne, but I had a tea partner." And she said, "My family moved from the lower 48 and moved to the village of Xilegg when I was very little, and the elders there gave me a tea partner." And I just thought, oh my goodness, what the wisdom and the beauty, right, of that, because the elders knew this little girl coming into the community was going to need someone to connect with in that way and to help her as she grew older. I just thought it was so beautiful. But this is something that's, again, it's built in. It builds relationships. It builds reciprocity, sharing and caring, new relationships. I mean, there's just so much that's happening around wellness and health and healing. And I just wanted to share that there's so many examples. I could go through almost every traditional practice or ceremony, and you can see those types of benefits. So powerful. So I just want to encourage us all that we can learn from these about how to incorporate these in both in our organizations and our communities, that they're internal to us. They are part of us. They're not something we seek outside of ourselves. So ceremony really is, attend an Alaska Native cultural ceremony and or event in your community, brainstorm with colleagues and community about how to honor and incorporate Alaska Native cultural knowledge and wisdom in your classrooms and schools, and reflect on your own cultural practices and how they impact wellness in your life. And I would like to say finally, like the last part of this is that as I've done trauma work, I've realized that ceremony happens in a lot of ways. So sometimes for some people, it could be around meditation, it just could be going out into nature. It really could be your own way of praying, or your own, it could even be dance, right? And so, yeah, Susan says, ceremony to me is the rhythm that lets you let go and connect. Oh my gosh, that's gorgeous. That's so beautiful. I personally feel this very strong through my faith and my practice of that faith. Thank you so much for that. Yes, and so I just want to say this is expansive, right? This is not just an Indigenous thing, but ceremony really has a lot to teach us about regaining balance and getting back into connection to ourselves, to each other in spirit, and managing what we're going through. So that ends my presentation at 5:04. I went over a couple of moments. So this is my contact email. I just want to say Dogadin Hashugadislen for inviting me. I could just kind of go off on little stuff, so I appreciate you listening. And I'll give it back over to you, Pat.
LaVerne, thank you so much. When I think about classrooms, I've had the honor to to sit in one of those School of Social Work classroom with an elder and watch a cohort. And I have never been in a classroom before that was more engaged and vibrant. They let me, kind of sneak in and visit, but it was the most rigorous, engaging discussion. And it's because people felt safe and honored and respected, and it was just amazing. And I think you got to a lot of that here. I mean, it certainly gave me a lot to think about. So I just really appreciate it, you taking your time and not only today, but to gather all this wisdom and connections. It's really helpful. At least for me, it gave me a lot to think about. Does anybody else have anything? We're seeing comments in the chat.
I was
This
reading
is beautiful. Yeah.
So good then. So I'm not sure website, Kim, that you're talking about. My own personal one, I don't have. I do presentations, but if you're talking about like the Alaska Resilience of the History and Hope one, that's through the Alaska Children's Trust. For Healthy School Consortium, Alaska Healthy School Consortium.
Okay.
Also, I want to add that with the trauma series in probably a month, we're going to be launching a video library, and we do have a whole bunch of short video clips of LaVerne addressing different things. So stay tuned for that. And our session, Heather has been getting those all ready for us. And so with the Association of Alaska School Boards. So you'll get to hear her speak again if you go and tune into some of that.
Oh, there's Heather. Hi. So a lot of that actually is in the videos. So Heather had me pull them apart into the different C's. Hey, Heather.
Yeah, there's and obviously the Department of Ed and the Association of Alaska School Boards with partners like First Alaskans and others have put together a lot of resources around trauma and resilience in schools, in Alaska schools. And actually many of you have probably participated in developing that. One of the cool things about it is it's Alaskan. I mean, more than 200 Alaskans have written that material and refined it. And anyway, there's just a lot of resources around. And again, thank you, LaVerne, and everyone for coming. And come back. I mean, and share the video when it comes out. Send it to your colleagues. Please, we want it used and Get a group together, watch it together, even better, right? Thank you.
Thanks so much. Signing out.
All right, take care of yourselves.
Bye.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.